Pro Media Professional Live Streaming Service. Experience the difference when it's live. Pro Media provides you a complete range of live and demand streaming solutions no matter what your special event may be. Weddings, funerals, concerts, press conferences, conventions, seminars, workshops, meetings, religious events, and more. For more information, call 669-5376 or 609-5264. Experience the difference when it's live. Welcome to this episode of Mixed Essence. We are discussing compatibility today. We are joined by two very distinguished guests, Andrew Gupta and Mr. Will Campbell. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
So let's get into this conversation on compatibility. When we say that, what exactly are we talking about? Just so we can set a frame of reference. Any initial thoughts?
All right, so I'll go first with the working definition. And for me, compatibility really is the ability and the willingness of two different persons, so obviously different persons in a relationship, to align their personalities in such a way that they are able to live harmoniously.
Okay. Andrew, are those your initial thoughts as well?
Yeah, just to, I guess to rephrase what he's saying, say it in different words. It's that to be able to coexist in a way that contributes to mutual flourishing.
Okay, mutual flourishing. So culturally, we use similarity, I think, a lot. When we talk about relationships, use it in the place of compatibility. But compatibility and similarity are not necessarily the same things. Can we delve into that a little bit? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd say it's not the same thing, and in fact, being two persons being too similar, it actually is counterproductive to compatibility.
Okay.
To give an abstract example first, if you think of a jigsaw puzzle, you have two pieces that fit together, and the reason they fit together is because they're different, so they can align. But if those two pieces were exactly the same, there's no way they were going to fit. And to be a bit more practical, let's think of a couple, two people who like cooking, but they both hate cleaning. You're going to have a problem, because if they always want to cook and nobody wants to clean,
Right.
how do we exist? And if you think of that in terms of personalities too, it's important to have many similarities, but also some differences, to be able to complement each other. Because if you have people, their personalities, they're both aggressive, they both like to be dominant and lead,
Right.
you're definitely going to have a problem.
Okay. So is what I'm hearing you say, when we're looking for similarities, maybe it's things more on like the surface levels, but not necessarily character wise or personality wise. I'm not sure.
If I may jump in here, I like Andrew's idea of the complementarity of personalities. And I agree that when you have two strong personalities, sometimes all you get is fights. And so, but in addition to that, in addition to the whole idea of complementarity, and the fact that the two might not work out in that case, I also believe that if there are too many similarities, then it's going to be a boring relationship. I mean,
Okay.
who wants a relationship where you agree on everything? You know, arguments are stimulating sometimes, and arguments are disagreements are opportunities for learning and for seeing new perspectives and new horizons, seeing things in a different way. So I think it is important for there to be a measure of overlap. And in direct response to your question, I think on the deeper things, it is important to have similarity.
Okay.
But it's also important to have some differences so that each person in the relationship retains a measure of individuality. You know,
Okay.
so you don't get subsumed into each other's personality, but you're allowed to be yourself, even though on the things that are more important to you, your core values, there is this there are similarities.
Okay, so an example of that, what? When we talk about core values, where there would be some benefit to there being similarities, maybe in belief system?
Belief systems very important. So, for example, if in my relationship I value family and family togetherness and family time,
Right.
then I would need to be in a relationship with someone who values that as well. Because if that is important to me and it's not important to the other person, then we're going to have some issues. So those core values, and I'd like to define core values a little bit. I
Yes.
mean, those are the things that are most important to you.
Okay.
And usually all of us have about 3 or 4 core values, and then we have other values that that are a little lower down in the hierarchy. But those things, those 3 or 4 things, maybe 4 or 5 things that are of greatest importance to you in your life, those are your core values.
Okay, so it would be useful to figure that out before connecting your life.
Absolutely, you'd have to know what was important to you before you link with someone else.
I'm just saying that because sometimes I don't think we think that deeply about things. Maybe it's something we know on a subconscious level, but it might not be something you consider with your consciousness. So when you're looking for a significant other, you may not ask yourself, do our core values align? Or it might be, I like adventuring. I like to go to the beach. They like to do that too. We like the same kind of music, that kind of thing. So you have, on that, I don't want to call it surface, but on that level of who you are, yeah, we can vibe about the same things. But then when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of who I am as a person and what you bring to the table, I don't think we always think that deeply about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say for compatibility, and it's not we have to agree on every single thing, but at least there must be some sort of, and just as agreement doesn't mean that if there are 10 things we agree on every point of it, but there must be enough agreement so we can coexist. And in terms of what are the important things, I heard someone said recently that you have to think about the things that will match in 50 years. So our taste in music, that might be nice, but that can change over time.
Right.
Very true.
Right.
But in terms of let's say faith, finances, education, how your spending habits and how you think about finance, that's gonna matter in 50 years.
Right.
And you don't have to, like I said, agree on every aspect of it. But because you have to, compatibility is not, it doesn't mean like we talk about core values, but it doesn't mean there's no room for change, growth, and compromise.
Right.
But you focus on those, the big things that are going to last and matter in 50 years. And you have, I would say, enough agreement so that you can coexist and flourish.
I like that. So, I think for persons that are not yet married, taking that kind, or maybe unmarried, taking that kind of approach would kind of help you get out of your heart a little bit.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Because I mean, in order to think of the things, and I noticed that Angela and I have different ways of wording, of expressing similar thoughts. So for him, it's those things that will matter in 50 years, and I call them core values. In order to assess your own core values, you got to get out of your heart. You know, because I could be smitten with somebody. I could like somebody bad, because they like to go to the beach and they like to swim and they like, the same recreational activities. But I mean, the recreational activities that I found exciting and interesting and important 15 years ago, 20 years ago, are different from what I find important now. And in order for me to assess that, I have to come out of my heart and go into my head a little bit and think of, what are those things that are going to be enduring? So it's not so much of a heart thing, but a head thing. And, I hope I'm not confusing people by not using the proper terminology for these things, but I hope that we understand what we're talking about here.
I think it's clear. I was listening to a speaker recently, and he was talking about, knowing your purpose and what are you placed on the earth here to do, etc., and how having a strong understanding of what the trajectory of your life is helps you align with people that can support that. But I don't want to say, I don't think we really think on that level. So it would take like a level of intentionality and
Absolutely.
practice to really start thinking deeply about where am I going? Where do I see myself in 20 years, 25 years, etc. And instead of looking at somebody for today, look at somebody that can walk that specific road.
Right. So is this the person that I see walking alongside me in at the end of that 20, in those 20 years or whatever?
Right.
I mean, it's exciting now.
Yeah.
But is this who is going to help me get to that place? And also, because very often, and I notice that it's becoming increasingly prevalent, we think of who can get us where we want to go. And there is very little thought of, will I help that person get where they want to go? So, again, it's intentionality. You have to be cerebral about this. You have to really sit down and think about this as opposed to, I just like Shabbat.
Just look nice.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking then, why do we often attract people we're not compatible with or attracted to? When you were making that comment, I just think of all the guys that have been friend zoned. While they have they're compatible with these specific women or this specific girl that they may be interested, but they're friend zoned because, he's too nice, or these other things. Why are we often attracted to people who we might not be able to do that kind of life building and all of that with?
I see you looking at me.
Not you, what do you think?
In terms of the friend zone, I don't know. The females have to answer that question. But I'll take a shot at the general question anyhow. I think there is a misunderstanding with compatibility, like the first point we discussed in terms of compatibility and similarities. We often misunderstand it, and then even if we understand it, sometimes we take the short view. So it's not our default position as humans is we don't deeply think about every single thing, and we couldn't function as humans if we had to stop and deeply think. But there are things that we do need to think about. So oftentimes you might have good chemistry with a person, but you're not compatible in terms of core values and where you're going into. So in the moment you'd rather be with that person, the person that you might be better suited to build a life with. At least initially, you might not have chemistry, and I don't think we have this. Maybe it's this Hollywood idea of chemistry has to be instantaneous. But sometimes
I look at her.
and you feel nothing. But then sometimes if you take time to get to know a person, you find the person you thought you had chemistry with, you don't. And the one you thought that, okay, maybe there's no chemistry there, there is.
Right.
So it calls for a bit more patience, I think, and a bit more long-term thinking.
Go ahead.
And attraction is instantaneous, really, generally, at least initially. Attraction tends to be instantaneous and superficial.
Right.
And if we stick with that, with the superficial level of thinking in the long term, then, when it comes to the everyday nitty gritty, we realize that you can't go to the beach every day and you can't sit down and laugh. He makes me laugh, she makes me laugh.
Right.
We can't do that every day. And 20 years from now, she's not fitting the ideals of cuteness as she did, initially. And so those things tend to fade, and those things tend to change over time. And so you have to at some point sit down and think to yourself, okay, what is it that draws me to this person, and are these the things that will matter later on?
I think we've been sold the notion that relationships are supposed to be easy. So maybe one of the first steps is getting rid of that misconception that, after the movies usually end at the wedding or the honeymoon and they live happily ever after. And that is not a reality. People have layers and trauma and issues and dynamics and nuances that you can't get at that level, that you don't. It only takes being in very close relation to see that person naked, so to speak. So this notion that it's supposed to be easy. So if, we might be vibing nicely at this level, but once it gets hard, okay, maybe we weren't compatible in the first place. Maybe this couldn't work, but it might just be your perception of how you think it's supposed to be and not necessarily that it can't work. Do you think there's such a thing as one-way compatibility? Is that such a thing? I don't know. I heard the concept before. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. She gave the example of the way a square fits into a circle. So the circle can fit into the square and be fully complete, I'm using that loosely, and satisfied within the square. But the square cannot fit into the circle neatly. The square would still have elements of itself that are not fulfilled in the relationship, still feels like there's something missing that they should have in this interaction. I don't know.
Well, I think Will is best equipped to answer that question. But before he gives us the proper answer, I'll give my bit. I think the very definition of compatibility would exclude such a scenario. Because I think compatibility is mutual, so it's a symbiosis. In the example that you give, I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just that I'll have to wrap my head around that and maybe think about it some more, but it sounds more parasitic than symbiosis to me. Yeah.
That is exactly what I was going to say. that one-way compatibility is actually opposite to the very definition of compatibility. So it's not possible to have one-way compatibility. You might have parasitism indeed, or you might have codependency, but there really is no one-way compatibility.
So can we touch on those two words that you used for persons that might not understand? So we have compatibility, and then you have a relationship that can be parasitic or parasitism. Is that?
I said parasitism. I don't even know if that's a real word. One person is feeding off the other, but not adding value to the other person, and it has to be mutual. It has to be, compatibility is about you supporting me, and I'm supporting you, and you're taking up slack for my deficiencies, and I'm taking up slack for your deficiencies. So it has to be two-way in order for there to be compatibility.
Okay. And the codependence, what are we talking about?
Codependency is where one person has a struggle, and I somehow find value in helping that person deal with this struggle. And so, you have a lot of relationships like that where a person thinks that, if this person overcomes this struggle, they're not going to need me anymore.
Right.
So I kind of help keep them in the struggle so that they will continue to need me.
Ouch. Okay. I know, I'm not sure if it's something that men do, but sometimes a woman would get into a relationship with a guy that she may consider to be a project. So he has this, a hard background. This is his specific frame of reference, but I can fix him.
Mm.
I can help him be better. I can, is that the same thing as the codependence, or that is something entirely different?
It could be
Okay.
an example of codependency, but it's not always the same thing.
Okay.
It is not always the same thing. That is a case where you see potential in a person
Mm-hmm.
and you feel like you are the one to bring out that potential, but the reality is that you can't change anyone.
Right.
And the other thing is when I pick you up as a fixer upper,
Mm-hmm.
you can see how you would need me.
Right.
But when you're fixed up, you might not need me anymore.
Mm.
So those rarely work out. So the problem with that is, first of all, you can't change a person. A person has to want to change. And secondly, if that person does change, now they see you from a different perspective, and you might no longer fit into the new person that they have become.
Okay. So then when we're looking for someone to spend our lives with, you need to look for the compatibility now.
Yes.
Not the compatibility, the possible compatibility if they do and when they do, because we do that a lot. My love is strong enough to change him, or I can make this happen. I can make this work. This is what we're looking for today, not tomorrow.
The question you have to ask yourself is, can I live with this person the way they are now? As opposed to who I think they could be. Maybe that person doesn't even want to be who you think they could
Right.
be. Can I live with this person the way that he or she is right now? And if your answer is yes, full speed ahead. But if you think that this person needs some fixing up in order for you to be comfortable with them,
Right.
you need to run.
I'm laughing because it is so true. And that's something I tell my friends. You have to consider if this person never changes. If they never change, can you be in a happy relationship? And you have to be honest with yourself. If the answer is no, then
you gotta forget all the nice things. The fact that the person has a nice job and you take cute pictures together, and you have a good time when you go out to have dinner. You have to throw all of that away and move on.
So given what you said, how important it is then, or where does authenticity fit into determining whether you're compatible with somebody or not? Is there a place for authenticity? Is there a place for that word where compatibility is concerned? What do you think?
Yeah, because if you're gonna know if you're compatible with that person has to see you and know you for who you truly are, and you have to see and know that person. So it's often in relationships, especially at the beginning, persons will say what they think the other person wants to hear, or
Right.
you'll say the things that you think will make the relationship possible and cause it to progress. But there needs to be consistency between what you're saying and what your core values are and who you are as a person. So when both parties they show who they are, then you can decide, okay, are we compatible or not? And there was a saying, I don't know, it was recent or a few years ago. It's, if somebody shows you who they are, just believe them.
Right.
Don't the person showing you who they are, but then you're thinking, like we were just talking about the potential and who they could become. Forget about that. Just look at who they are, who they're showing you.
Yeah.
And we in those initial stages as well, we have to sometimes be intentional about creating conditions that allow people to show us who they are. So when we go on dates, we are usually our best selves.
Right.
And that is usually not a good space to see who a person is. I mean, if I'm taking you to movies and I'm opening all the doors, I'm paying all the for all of the meals and so on. I'm being my best self. So you want to give yourself opportunities to see this person in their natural element,
Right.
because movies and dinners are not our natural element. We are our best selves. So let me use myself as an example. When I'm home, I eat with a shovel. But when I go to dinner,
Right.
I have a knife and fork and I have my
Right.
napkin spread and so on.
Mhm.
So we're not our best selves in those situations. So take time to observe that person in their natural habitat. Visit the workplace or watch how they operate when they're playing a game with somebody or when they're driving and somebody gets them angry. How do they respond in that anger and so on? You want to see them in their natural surroundings, in more authentic environments. And you observe how they behave in those environments, because when the makeup comes off and when the masks come off, that's when you're going to see the real person.
Right. How they might handle a conflict situation.
Yeah, well, I was actually going to point that out. That's why conflict it's important, because and I guess based on personalities too, want to bring in how you handle conflict is important, and you are going to have conflict.
Right.
And it's good to have them early on so you see the person, because it's hard to fake it if you're actually in a conflict.
Right.
But you have to ask yourself, okay, that person may have a way of handling conflict, and you have your way. Is this the way you want to handle conflict? Because there's some people, they're loud and they're aggressive in handling conflict.
Right.
That's just who they are by default. And then there's some other persons a bit more quiet and calm, and they prefer to talk things through. And imagine those two persons in a conflict. So you have to also, it comes back to compatibility. The way you handle conflict, that's important.
Okay.
The way you handle conflict and the way you function under stress. I think that those are two really important elements: conflict and stress. Conflict is a form of, it's a stress situation. But who we are under stress is who we really are.
Who we are under stress is who we really are. Okay. That's useful.
I hear people saying this thing all the time. I'm a nice person, but don't get on
Don't
my
get
bad side.
this.
Who you are on your bad side is who you are.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, all of us can be really nice when things are going well.
Right. Right. That's interesting. Guys, I hope you all listening. So what you see when there is no filter, that is really who a
That is a
person
real
is.
person. That is a real person.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I think our time is up. But this was really useful. For me, some of the key takeaways were, focus on what will matter in 50 years. So that helps you to get out of your heart a little bit and more into your head, so you can make wiser choices based on your core values and not what you might be feeling in the moment. And definitely who you are when the mask is off is who you really are. So if you are by chance the type of person that is willing to work on yourself, don't just work on the dynamic that everybody can see. Work on the hard places. So when you become stronger, that person becomes stronger as well. The relationship is better. So again, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you here.
It was great to be here.
That's all the same here.
Thank you.
Pro Media Professional Live Streaming Service. Experience the difference when it's live. Pro Media provides you a complete range of live and demand streaming solutions, no matter what your special event may be. Weddings, funerals, concerts, press conferences, conventions, seminars, workshops, meetings, religious events, and more. For more information, call 669-5376 or 609-5264. Experience the difference when it's live.